The early days of spring, where it's too wet and muddy for the main bulk of our work to begin. Yet, the absence of snow affords the rare opportunity to take care of the small but necessary jobs, like securing the loft joists with heavy bolts, something we were unable to devote our attention to until now, or by placing a 500-pound cutting head back onto the sawmill trailer, which we used to haul some roofing steel into the build site last week. The humble gains of early spring days may seem of little value at the outset, but these in-between tasks are the foundation from which the latter year victories are built. And so during this interim season of cold mud and gray sky, we were compelled to pay closer attention to the lesser things, so that the greater good of the cabin can be realized. Or as Zechariah chapter 4 verse 10 puts it, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand." Well, my name isn't Zerubbabel, and I'm not working with a plumb line today, but I can appreciate the sentiment. Well, spring is officially here, and this little snow pile is pretty much all that is left of winter. You can see there's lots of mud around here, which is not so nice in the springtime, but the plan is once my dad and I finish most of this cabin, I mean, we're always going to be working on it, but once we're mostly finished building it, my plan is to fill this whole area in here with wood chip. And as well, I'm hoping to take some field stone and to make a stone skirt around the bottom of the cabin here. Last year, at this time, we didn't have a roof on the cabin. And so the logs had been just soaked from months and months of having snow on them and then having the snow melt. They had a bit of a green tinge to them. It was sort of like an algae that was covering them. This log here is a good example of what I was talking about. You'll see that the log that I have propped up here against the cabin is quite green in color compared to the rest of the logs. This log has been laying down on the ground and has been covered in snow all winter long. But these logs, these wall logs, have stayed dry all winter, and they are much lighter in color. And that's because last fall we put a roof on the cabin, and so that's kept the logs drier, and so they're not nearly as green this year. And as we fully close in the cabin and get a proper roof on, it'll alleviate itself, I think, quite a bit. Now my plan is to treat these logs at some point, and I have a couple ideas in mind, but if you have a log cabin of your own and you have a special recipe that you use to treat your logs, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your suggestions and hear from your experiences as well. Now, I have been getting questions from people over the years, especially when the cabin didn't have a roof covering. I was often asked, am I worried about my logs rotting, especially without a roof being on it? The quick answer is that no, I wasn't worried about it. First of all, this is eastern white cedar, which is known to be naturally rot resistant and bug resistant. So it's a really durable kind of wood. It's really resilient. So it can take a higher moisture content without having any issues. As well, I've been checking the logs with a moisture meter every year. I bought a little moisture meter from a hardware store for like 30 bucks or something. And I've been checking the moisture content. For a log to be relatively safe from rot and from bugs and stuff, the logs need to be dry. So the drier the logs are, the less likely they are to rot. For wood that is outside, it needs to have a moisture content of about 18% or less. So 18% or under, that's good. Your logs are nice and dry, which means that they likely won't rot or have issues with bugs. So I had the moisture meter on this morning on this cabin, and even though it's really wet outside, you can see there's mist hanging in the air. It's just rained overnight. The logs are right now at 14 to 15% moisture content. So that's really good. That's right where I want it to be, which means this cabin is going to have no issues. And once we enclose the cabin, once we get a proper roof on, I'm sure that the logs will be that much drier. But 14 to 15% is really, really good for wood, especially that is outside on a wet day like this. Anyway, it's really nice being out here today. It's great hearing the birds singing again. I've been installing some metal lath with my dad, and so we've finished doing the lath on the back side of the cabin, and it's done on this side as well. And so today I'm going to work on the front and eventually on the far broad side, getting the lath there as well. Once that's done, I can start work on doing the windows and then ultimately the roof. So this is going to be the year that we get the cabin filled in. Oh yeah, and then there's the chinking to do as well. So there's still work to do, but we're a lot closer than we've ever been before. And this is going to be the year that we enclose the cabin. We get it dried in. Now I know that I've already shown a bit of our lath work in a previous episode, but since then we've learned a few things which have helped us refine our technique. So I thought I'd mention them here. Originally, we used 2-inch Ardox nails, which we hammered into the top and bottom of each lath strip to hold it in place. The downside of these nails is that their heads are smaller than the mesh openings. This meant that they had to be bent slightly once hammered in so that they could hook onto the lath. Otherwise, the strips would just slide right off the nails. My dad and several viewers suggested that roofing nails would be a great alternative, considering that their heads are bigger than the mesh, meaning that we could nail them straight into the lath. But the roofing nails did have a downside. They couldn't be nailed into the top without great difficulty, and it all came down to the angle at which we've installed the lath. You may have noticed that the lath is angled outward at the bottom edge, which helps to shed rainwater away from the cabin, preventing moisture from getting trapped between the courses. This makes it easy to place nails along the bottom of the lath, but not so easy along the top. It is especially hard to hammer a roofing nail into the top because its broad head is at an awkward angle in relation to the angle of the mesh. Ardox nails, however, although still somewhat awkward to hammer into the top, can at least be bent into a better position. On the other hand, roofing nails can't be so easily bent, which is why we haven't been using them along the top. So this has been the technique we've developed. We use 2-inch Ardox nails at the top and hook them into the lath. Then we use 1 1/4 inch roofing nails to pin the bottom. We found this to be tidier and sturdier than other methods we've seen, and so we're quite happy with it. The reason why we're installing lath between the log courses is to establish a framework that we will eventually apply the chinking to. I'll be the first to tell you that I'm no expert when it comes to chinking. I have, however, been able to draw from my own limited experience and the experience of others to form an educated opinion on the topic. It seems that as far as mortar chinking goes, there are two categories. There is some that needs to be touched up on a yearly basis, while other chinking jobs can go decades without needing any attention whatsoever. The difference seems to be in the lath, or lack thereof. In log cabins where diamond mesh lath has been applied, the chinking has usually fared quite well. That's because the mesh and mortar work together to strengthen the chinking as a whole, making it much more resilient to the stresses that are placed upon it. Much in the same way that rebar is used to greatly increase the strength and longevity of a concrete structure. In log cabins where lath has not been used, the chinking seems to be far more prone to cracking, even to the point where entire pieces of mortar can loosen and begin to fall out. Now, I know that I run the risk of maybe generalizing too much here, but I've noticed that lath really does make a big difference in the lifespan of mortar chinking. Of course, I can only speak from my own experience and observations, but I'm interested to hear from you as well. Do you agree with my opinion, or do you disagree? Either way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, because the best way that we can learn is together. Well, it's been a few days now since I started doing the lath on the cabin, and what I did is after I filmed a little bit of it, I put the camera down and then I just went to work. And so I worked for several days without filming what I was doing, because once I filmed a little bit of it, you pretty much had the idea of what I was doing, and I didn't want it to seem tedious. Once in a while, I like to stand back and just take a look at the work that I've done, and I find this really encouraging, especially after working intensively on the cabin for several days to finish a certain stage. It's nice just to stand back and get the big picture of what the cabin looks like. But today it's a little funny, because as I stand back and I look at all the work that I've done on the lath over these past several days, the cabin looks pretty much the same. There's pretty much no difference. And that's because the mesh is just so fine, it's hard to see from any sort of a distance, except for some glints of silver here and there as the light reflects off the roofing nails. But the good news is that in the long run, this diamond mesh lath is going to make a huge difference to the chinking once it's been applied. It'll give it that strength that it needs, so that it'll be very low maintenance, if it'll need any maintenance at all over the years. With the roof, I have to wait a bit longer before I start working on the roof, just because I need to get a few more cedar posts in to finish off the rafters. So what I might do is I might bring in a window or two and just start framing inside the windows, and maybe even getting some windows in, which would make the cabin look so much different. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, that's where I am today, and so I'm going to keep going. As I prepared to head out for the day, I loaded some firewood into the trailer to drop off at my grandfather's woodshed while on my way home. That's it for today. Until next time, my friends, stay safe, be well, and God bless.